Welcome to a joint collaboration by Phi Theta Kappa and the Jack Kent Cooke Foundation to bring you more information about the Jack Kent Cooke Foundation Undergraduate Transfer Scholarship. Let me see if I can advance my slide here. Oops, why is it not? There we go. We'll spend the next hour together talking about the Jack Kent Cooke Foundation's Undergraduate Transfer Scholarship. We're pleased to have Alan Royal, Director of Outreach and Partnerships from the Jack Kent Cooke Foundation, to give us all the details. I'm Heather Johnson, the Senior Director of Scholarships at Phi Theta Kappa. And after Alan's presentation, I will share some scholarship tips and tricks to make your applications a bit more competitive. And we also have Lori Brown, our Director of Scholarships, who will be monitoring our chat. So please feel free to drop in any questions in there, and we'll answer them in the Q&A after as time permits. I can't get that. There we go. All right. At Phi Theta Kappa, we recognize you for your academic excellence and achievement. We promote engagement through a variety of resources for students, such as our PTK Edge courses, Honors in Action, programming, opportunities for leadership, etc. All of these engagement opportunities will help you in your pursuit of scholarships. And more than 90 million in scholarships is available for eligible Phi Theta Kappa members. We also work to identify and share opportunities such as the Jack Kent Cooke Foundation Undergraduate Transfer Scholarship. And to help you achieve your goals and land scholarships, Phi Theta Kappa offers a full library of scholarship information at support.ptk.org. A little bit about by the numbers about Phi Theta Kappa and Jack Kent Cooke. So first of all, scholarships are the #1 reason why students join Phi Theta Kappa. And 3/4 of our PTK members intend to transfer, which makes the Jack Kent Cooke Undergraduate Transfer Scholarship a very good fit. PTK members tend to be strong contenders for the program. And over time, we have a rate of about 88% of the Cooke scholars are also Phi Theta Kappa members. All right, I'm going to turn it over to you, Alan. So just let me know when you need me to advance a slide.
All right, thank you, Heather. And hi to everyone that's attending. Really glad you all made time to join us tonight. My name's Alan. As Heather said, I'm the Director of Outreach and Partnerships at the Jack Kent Cooke Foundation. So I'm going to spend a little time talking to you guys about the Undergraduate Transfer Scholarship. So give you a little bit of background about the Jack Kent Cooke Foundation. So the Cooke Foundation was founded in the year 2000 with the mission to advance the education of promising students who have financial need. So we do that primarily through our scholarship programs. And again, the programs are seeking to find students that are doing well academically and also have demonstrated need for their finances with college. And we can go to the next slide. So again, just to sort of briefly tell you a little more about the scholarship itself, it's an undergraduate scholarship opportunity for community college sophomores. So if you are going to have sophomore level status by January, you would be potentially eligible to apply. And this is a scholarship program. So in addition to the financial support that we offer, which I'll talk a little bit more about in a couple of slides, we also have advising support as well as networking opportunities within the Cooke Scholar community. And I think that both of those pieces, in addition to the financial support, really help make the scholarship a unique opportunity and something that students become really invested in addition to simply, getting their tuition covered. So throughout this session, I'm going to talk about the program itself, and then I'll talk about the application process, which includes eligibility and selection criteria, and just a few important things to keep in mind if you're considering applying or already working on your application currently. All right. Thanks, Heather. And so the program goals essentially, as I've mentioned, are really geared towards helping support you to accomplish your goals. So not simply providing the financial support, but making sure that you have the advising support to attend the college of your choice, the college that you feel like will be the best fit for you, as well as connecting with other scholars, other students, mentors, professors, et cetera, that can really help guide your journey and point you in the right direction for accomplishing those goals. And then during that time in the program, you'll work with your advisor on what comes after your undergraduate experience as well. So many students will move into the workforce, or they may decide they want to apply to graduate school to continue their studies. And so we support that process in helping you define those steps to get to that next point. All right. So the program experience, again, I touched on these already. A few other important pieces to understand within them. With the advising, again, you're getting paired with an educational advisor that works on staff at the Cooke Foundation. You will build a one-on-one relationship with this person, and they will help you navigate that transition to your new campus. So that will include identifying resources on campus, as well as other supports within the Cooke resources and network to make sure that your transition is smooth and you know what you need to do to be successful. And then the financial support, students are eligible to receive up to $55,000 per year for 2 to 3 years to complete their bachelor's degree at their chosen university. So it's a good amount of money. Our goal is really to hopefully help you graduate from college debt-free or as close to that as possible. And then also the scholar community, again, you will become familiar and get to know other Cooke scholars, both that are on campuses that you may be attending, as well as attending other campuses. And we really try to host events and create a community environment where students can make natural connections. They can benefit from those connections and also meet alums that have graduated, gone through the program, moved into their career field, and they may be able to offer support and advice for you if you might be interested in something that they have experience with. And then finally, the opportunity to apply for the graduate scholarship is a really nice benefit to the program as well. So if you know that you're planning to attend graduate school or want to apply, and you're thinking about, well, how am I going to pay for that? It's a nice benefit that if you become a Cooke College Scholar or transfer scholar, you will have the opportunity to apply for and receive that graduate funding. So all of those are really important keys to keep in mind. And we can go to the next slide, and I'll tell you a little more about the advising relationship. So each Cooke Scholar, again, is assigned an educational advisor. That person works with them, and the advisors are assigned based on regional assignments. So they work with students from the same campuses in the same regions of the country, so they can have that familiarity with the campus and the different pieces in that environment that they already have had experience working with other students to navigate. So that's a really important key. And we, again, are all based in the Virginia office. We do have the opportunity to travel. And so educational advisors will travel about once a semester to visit those campuses, meet students in person, and build that face-to-face relationship as well, though the rest of the advising is done from a distance. So you'll work with them via email, phone calls, video chats, and webinars like this one. So lots of different ways that you'll be interacting with and getting to know your advisor. All right, the next slide. And again, the Scholars Network is a very important aspect as well. One thing I'd like to mention regarding that is our sort of, I'd say, marquee event that we have annually, which is called Scholars Weekend. So for students that receive the scholarship in August before they begin at their new institution, we invite everyone to Washington, D.C. area, to the National Conference Center. Obviously, we haven't been able to do that during the pandemic. We have continued to have Scholars Weekend in a virtual format, and we're hopeful that we may return to an in-person format next year, still working to see if that's going to be possible. But it's a really important event to attend. It's sort of an orientation event that really grounds you in the experience of the program, allows you to meet people face to face for the first time, and hopefully really get excited about being a part of this community. All right. And then again, once again, the graduate scholarship rewards up to $150,000 towards your graduate school costs, tuition fees, et cetera. So we're hoping that, again, that really goes a long way in your graduate school expenses. It does depend, obviously, on what field you're pursuing, but we know that that dollar amount will definitely support and help you move through that with less worry about the cost. Okay, so if all of this sounds appealing to you, it sounds like, you know, the type of opportunity that you want to apply for, the first thing you'll want to do is check to see if you're eligible to apply. So I've got the eligibility requirements listed here on this slide. Quickly to go through them, you do have to have a 3.5 GPA, minimum cumulative 3.5. And then for financial need, you have to earn a maximum of $95,000 annually in order to be financially eligible to apply. And then in addition to that, as I mentioned, you need to be sophomore status by January 1st, or you could be a recent graduate. So if you've already completed your associate's degree within the last 5 years, but you have not transferred to a 4-year college yet and have not enrolled for a full-time semester at a 4-year college in the past, then you would be eligible to apply. All right, and then the selection criteria. So these are the pieces that we're looking at in every application, or looking for in every application, the things that we're evaluating. It is an academic scholarship, so of course academic achievement is a big piece of what we're evaluating, and it is the heaviest weighted aspect of the application. So be sure to keep that in mind when you are completing the application, thinking about the things that you want to write about in your essays, and just the things that you want to highlight in your experience. You definitely want to be focused on your academic experiences, but we are also interested in your extracurricular activities. So if you're involved on campus and things like that, we want to hear about that too. And so that's sort of where the leadership criteria comes into play. We want to know, what types of things are you involved in? What are you passionate about? What have you invested your time in order to contribute to, whether that's a cause that you care about, an organization that you might be involved with, or any other community activity, even family activities, things that you do to support family members could all go under that category of leadership. So we'll ask you questions about that also. And then finally, the third criteria is persistence. And so when we talk about persistence, we're not looking to see who maybe has had sort of the greatest adversity or has had to overcome, really big obstacles. We're more interested in whatever obstacles you may have encountered during your journey. How did you respond to those? What steps did you take to set goals for yourself in order to overcome or work through the challenges that you've encountered in your life, as well as your educational experience? So those are the three criteria, in addition to the financial need, which we do verify. Initially, when you're submitting the application, you will self-report your income. And if you make it to the semifinalist round in the review, we will ask you to submit documentation to verify your income. So just be aware of that coming down the pipeline a little bit later in the selection process. But initially, you would just self-report and let us know what your income is, and we will trust the honor system as far as that goes. All right, and how do you apply? So you've met the eligibility requirements and you feel the criteria is something that you're strong in. You're going to want to look for the application in Common App. So some of you may be familiar with Common App, others may not be. Common App is basically a tool that was created to allow students to apply to a lot of different colleges and scholarship opportunities in one place. So you'll complete sort of a basic application that could apply to any school that utilizes Common App as their application. And then each school will have sort of a supplemental application that's relevant to the direct questions that they're asking you. And so it's the same for Jack Kent Cooke Foundation. We will have our own supplemental application that you find in Common App, and you should be able to complete all the questions right there. And so we definitely will, support you if you're having any challenges or issues with Common App. Don't hesitate to email us, and I'll give you that contact information in a little bit. But just know that that is where the application is located. It's the only place that you can apply to the undergraduate transfer scholarship. And you can access it from our website as well. You can go directly to Common App's website, or we have a button on our website that will link you to create an account. All right. And components of the application, again, just for your information, if you're preparing to work on the application, these are the main things listed on the slide that you'll need to think about collecting. So again, I mentioned the finances and how that works. You'll also need to submit 2 recommendations. So you'll want to think in advance about which professors, mentors, et cetera, that you might want to ask for that recommendation. And that is an online system. So you would enter their email address into your Common application. The system will email them directly and ask them to submit a recommendation on your behalf. And they would submit that through the Common App portal. So it's a pretty straightforward process. Just know that you want to be asking your recommenders now and entering their email address if they give you the okay for them to be a recommender, so they can begin working on that. We'll ask you about your activities and honors also, as I mentioned before. So there will be a place where you can submit a resume that basically encapsulates everything that you've been involved in. And then there are also pieces in the Common application where you can put in the activities that you've been involved with. Tell us, in a brief explanation, sort of what that activity is about and a little bit about why you are involved in it. And we'll also ask you about your family information, again, to sort of help understand the dynamics within your household and the financial situation within your household. And then you will, of course, write some essays. And so one difference with the application this year is that we are not requiring the Common App personal statement that is included in all of the Common application materials. So we do have our own essays, shorter essays that are required. And so there are 4 short response essay questions, about 150 words maximum for each question. And so you'll want to give some thoughtful answers, maybe talk with some people, help support you working on those and making sure that you're submitting the best possible response that you can. And then finally, we'll ask you a question about what's your plan for your major and your area of study? What are your plans for a career? And this is not to sort of lock you into whatever decision you might be leaning towards at this point, but more so we can understand your passions, understand where you are currently in your academic journey and what you're thinking about for your future, because that helps us get an understanding of the type of student you are and whether or not you would be a good fit for the program. Okay, and then this slide just lists a couple of references for seeking additional help. So for the Common App, if you find that you're having trouble, technical difficulties, it's best to contact them directly. They have a nice website that has a lot of information, frequently asked questions that you can browse around and hopefully get most of your issues dealt with. But if you really are having trouble and you need to contact them directly, you can reach out to the email address listed on the slide here. And then if you have questions about the program itself, about the application process, or anything having to do with the Cooke Foundation or the transfer scholarship, you can email us directly at scholarships@jkcf.org. I would also encourage you to visit the website, jkcf.org/transfer. And there's a lot of great information, videos, materials that you can download, and just general information about the scholarship and about Cooke Scholars. So I encourage you guys to visit the website if you haven't already. And finally, some key dates to keep in mind. So the scholarship opened on October 1st. It won't close until January 10th. So you still have a good amount of time to work on your application. And I encourage you to, take your time with the application. A question that I get often is, if I submit quickly or early, does that affect my chances at receiving it? Is it a sort of a first come, first serve type of review process? The answer is it's not. We start the review process after the deadline. So take your time. I wouldn't advise waiting until the last 2 or 3 days to start working on it. But if you find yourself sort of taking your time through the different pieces, I think that's a good approach, again, to ensure that you're submitting the best application that you can do. And after the deadline, we will begin the review process. In late February, we will notify the semifinalists. So that will be about the top quarter or so of students that have applied. And we will then request financial information from them and do a couple of more sort of requests for materials at that stage with the semifinalists. And we'll go through that process for the next couple of months. And then in April, we will announce and notify the students who are the new recipients of the undergraduate transfer scholarship. All right, and then finally, if you guys are social media users, I encourage you to follow us on social media. We are pretty active on Twitter and Instagram. We try to post about not only the application and what's going on with the Cooke Foundation, but essentially we try to promote the scholar stories that we are accumulating. They will talk a lot about their experiences online. We will sometimes amplify those. We do blog posts and feature posts on certain scholars that are doing really cool and unique things. And so I think it's a good way to just sort of get a feel for the community, the type of people that are Cooke Scholars, and what's going on in the program. So I encourage you to follow us if you have accounts of your own on social media. So I'll stop there and let Heather jump back in.
Thank you so much, Alan. That was really a lot of good information there. So I will go ahead and follow up and share a little bit. So now that we have all this good information, where do you get started? So one of our first recommendations, of course, for people who are considering applying for scholarships is to start by writing a scholarship resume. This document will include career interests, your goals, summary of your scholarships and awards, obligations, activities you've done with Phi Theta Kappa, and volunteerism. And so to go through each of these sections briefly, awards and scholarships are basically consider any awards or scholarships that you have received. Identify whether or not they're college level, state level, or national level awards, and be sure to share the degree of competitiveness, who awards it, and what the purpose of this scholarship might be. That helps give judges a better perspective, and it helps you, when you have that all in one place, to be able to articulate that on the scholarship application. Under obligations, be sure to put any family responsibilities. Work, we usually consider tutoring to be part of work and not necessarily volunteerism unless you're not getting paid for it. Church or worship activities would go under obligations, as well as any non-volunteer activities that you do. For Phi Theta Kappa activities, be sure to document your level of involvement with PTK. This is where you definitely want to include if you've held any leadership positions, if you have organized an event. It's okay if you're part of a group too, but just be sure to indicate things like the number of hours you volunteer with PTK, participation in any service events, things like that. And then finally, with volunteerism, be sure to include any service activities that are not covered in other areas. You can list start and end dates, number of hours per week that you volunteer, your level of engagement, if you've held any leadership positions, if there's any activities you've managed, or things like that. Anything that would be of interest to judges. Keep in mind that you want to be sure to include only your 2-year or community college information. Only include high school information on your resume if it's relevant to your total story. In all areas, consider cohesion. How does this tell your story or your long-term goals? So for example, if you are an English major with a goal of becoming like a college professor, consider how all of your activities and obligations and volunteerism would tell that story and show how you are moving towards that long-term goal. If you're interested, you can find more information on the scholarship resume in our scholarship support library at support.ptk.org. Just click on scholarships. So let's talk a little bit about what are the pillars of a strong application. What is the purpose of the application? Does your application show your authentic story? For example, does it show your activities, your volunteerism, your major, your career goals, your long-term goals? How cohesive is it? Does your transcript or your leadership show that you are doing things that are centered around your goals? How authentic is it? We want you really to be your true self. Don't write an application based on what you think a judge wants to hear. You won't do well if you do that. They really want to know who you are as a person, what motivates you, what drives you. Don't copy and paste part of the question. Tell your story and use vivid details. Please remember that means that sometimes it is okay to discuss failure or lessons learned. It doesn't all have to be happy. With your writing, be sure to use proper grammar, spell check, and as Alan mentioned, definitely have somebody proofread your application before you submit. Be sure to tell your story. Again, just a common theme, you'll see that throughout. And leadership in action. Identify projects that you've completed. And again, it's okay if that project is part of a group project. Just be sure to write about what you've accomplished, because if you don't boast about your accomplishments in your application, there's somebody else in their application who is boasting about theirs. And so just remember that you have what we call, there's an intersection value. There is a place where your passions and your involvement overlap, and that's what we want to look at. So let's talk a little bit about the essay. How do we write a good essay? Well, first of all, you would be surprised how many people don't actually write an essay that answers the questions. So be sure to read the instructions. Make sure that you read, understand, and follow all the instructions. This can include things as simple as making sure you fit the word count, you're using the right font, and that you're answering the correct question prompt. Be very thorough. Answer all parts of the application. If you have blank or partial responses, that can make it seem that you're not paying attention to detail or you lack academic seriousness. If it's incomplete, then we wonder if you've really done something. Both of these things would make a judge question your ability to succeed. And then show me. Use those specific and vivid details to demonstrate what you are saying, including things like how many, quantify things, how much, how often, what is that important contextual information that will help tell your story? Be sure not to use generic terms and be very cautious of using acronyms or abbreviations. Some people are not going to know what NSPA is unless you tell them what it is. And finally, passion and personality. Make the reviewer remember you by concisely articulating your motivations and passions. This is the time where it is okay to show off. We're not asking you to be braggy, but we kind of are. You want to be able to tell people what you're doing and how well you're doing it. It is okay here to be vulnerable. It is okay to explain those challenges or other things that you've overcome. Just be very cautious about writing something that is what we would call a sob story. And finally, the letter of recommendation. Again, read the instructions. This might help determine the person that you're going to ask to write your letter of recommendation. Be sure to share those instructions as well with the recommender. Sometimes if the letter of recommendation is requested online, like the Jack Kent Cooke Foundation, that request will have all the instructions included. Be sure to find somebody who knows you well and can write about you in detail. So if you're thinking about applying for the Jack Kent Cooke scholarship right now, but you don't have somebody that you would know you would want to write a letter of recommendation for you, spend some time before the application is due to build a relationship with a professor or somebody who works with you or somebody who will be able to write a letter of recommendation. Ask your recommender to be sure to include examples and specific details to show your experiences, your leadership, and your accomplishments. This is where it would be a great idea to include a copy of that scholarship resume. If you've written that, you can give it to the recommender and they have lots of examples of the things you've been involved with. Give your letter plenty of time to write your recommender plenty of time to write the letter. Most cannot complete a letter of recommendation if you give them 1 day to finish. They need time to do it. And by giving them time to do it, this also gives you time that if the recommender is unable to complete the task, you can ask a second person to consider writing it for you. Ask for a copy. Some recommenders may not feel comfortable with this, and that's okay. But if you can get a copy of your letter, it can help ensure that you're getting a good quality application. And if not, you could consider whether or not you need to ask somebody else to write you a letter if you're unsatisfied. And finally, be sure to send a thank you note. Recommenders are taking time out of their day, and they may be being asked by many, many students to write letters of recommendation, especially during busy scholarship season. If you send a thank you note and show your gratitude, this may allow you to reuse the letter of recommendation for another purpose, or your recommender may be willing to continue writing you letters of recommendation in the future. And here, I just wanted to share, I'm going to stop sharing here in a minute, and we'll do some Q&A. But I want to share this because here are our email addresses. Please feel free to take both of these down, scholarships@jkcf.org and scholarships@ptk.org. These are both places where you can request information, ask questions, and somebody will get back to you. All right. So thank you again for joining us. This concludes the presentation part of it, and we have some time for some Q&A. So Lori, have we received any questions?
We have received several questions, and I've tried to group them together.
Fabulous.
So the first one is concerning the demonstrated financial need, and it's 2 questions rolled up into one. Is the $95K figure based on personal earnings as an applicant, or is it based off parents' income? And the second part of that from another student would be, for the financial information, are you using the income tax year 20 or 21?
Really good question. So the income requirement includes parent income if you are under the age of 30. The way we actually calculate it is based on a percentage. And so we'll include a percentage of the parent income in addition to the student income if they're under the age of 30. So that's really important to know. And then, oops, I forgot the second part. What was the second part?
The second part is on what year is used for the income. Is the tax year 20 or 21?
The last 3 tax years. So it will be 2020, 2019, and 2018.
Those were good questions.
Excellent questions. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
The next question we've gotten is academic achievement more than a GPA?
Definitely. So the GPA minimum, another question that we'll get a lot is, well, are you really looking for the people that are getting the highest GPAs? And that's definitely not the case. We'll have, some folks that have the 3.5, some that have a 3.7. So we're not only looking at that. We'll be looking at, obviously, what you submit in your essay writing. We'll be looking at what your recommenders have to say about your engagement in class, about their perspective on your academic abilities. And then we'll also look to see, in other places, like how have you told us about some of your special projects, independent study, even your career question or your area of study question will give us some insight on your academic strength.
Sorry, I keep getting lost over here in my questions. We've had a student ask, does work experience, like current work experience, count as leadership experience?
It can, absolutely. We definitely want to know about your work experience, so don't leave that off. And in instances where you feel like what you're doing for work really has allowed you to grow your leadership or demonstrates how much of a leader you are, we would love for you to highlight that if that's important for you.
I'm going back to the chat because I think does work experience count? Yeah, we've answered that one. I've got 2 more income related questions, Alan.
Okay.
Does Jack Kent Cooke consider if you've had a change of income over the last year as well? And what if you don't have 3 years of income tax?
Mm-hmm. 2 really good questions. So the There could be a sudden fluctuation in your income for a variety of reasons. I think especially during this time period where we've experienced the pandemic. So if there is like an aberration and it's not typical for you to, earn that, and we can clearly see that if we look at all 3 years and you've explained the situation to us, you wouldn't be disqualified if you say had 1 year that was like maybe you earned 97K, but the rest of the years you were well below 95. So do keep that in mind, that if there's a special circumstance that impacted your income, don't let that disqualify you. You can explain that to us. Absolutely.
Awesome. So I have a student who's asked in the chat, they attended a 4-year institution back in 88 to 91, but did not graduate. They're now at the community college, graduating in the spring. Would the previous attendance at the 4-year disqualify that person?
There's a good chance, yes. So it depends. So if you attended and you completed a semester, and particularly if those credits maybe are transferable, then unfortunately you would be ineligible. There have been circumstances where people attended and maybe they withdrew, or maybe there were special circumstances that required them to have to stop. So if you feel like you have a unique scenario, again, I would encourage you to either email us and explain it. And there's also places in the application where you can explain it if you've already started working on it. So definitely share your story, but I want to be transparent that there's the possibility that you wouldn't be eligible.
Good to know. Another eligibility question: is citizenship or permanent residency status one of the criteria?
Very good question. So no, citizenship is not a requirement. And so permanent residency is, in the sense that, we expect you to attend college in the United States, but your status is not something that we are asking about. So if you are undocumented, DACA, et cetera, I definitely encourage you to apply. If you're an international student, definitely would encourage you to apply.
Awesome. And a couple of questions about the scholarship, about the resume there. And I'm not really sure if we're talking about the Jack Kent Cooke submission or the scholarship resume. I would think for just a general scholarship resume, just as a body of work and a reference, there would be no limit. But for your submission, is there a limit on how long the resume could be?
There's not a limit. I would say that, once you get to 2 full pages, I think you've probably got a solid resume. I would encourage you, as Heather mentioned, to maybe work with someone on your resume also. So if you're getting people to help review your application, include your resume in that process too, and you'll be able to be sure you're highlighting the important things. Another important thing to mention is that we're only interested in what you've been doing during your time in college. Mm-hmm. So your resume doesn't have to go back to high school, and that sometimes is what makes them a little lengthier. So you can keep that in mind.
I will also add that as a person who has read, who has served as a judge for multiple organizations, if there are attachments, make sure that they are concise. So when you say like try to stick to the, maybe the 2-page limit or so, while there might not be a limit, just make sure that the words that you are putting on the page are concise, because judges have to read a lot. And if you can't get to the point, it makes it not seem as good.
Mm-hmm. Agreed. Where can we get a copy of the recording of this webinar? I think we're going to post it.
Yeah, we're going to try to put it, I believe, in the scholarship support library. Is that correct, Lori? Yeah, so if you go to the support.ptk.org and you click on the scholarships link, we should have it there. Give us a few days or so to get it up there.
Yeah, I'd say sometime next week, based on the current workload. And lastly, and you may have covered this already, Alan, but would you include current work experience on the Jack Kent Cooke application?
Yes. Yeah. Again, if you feel like that's an important part of things that you want to highlight, include it. Really good questions.
Yep. I've got some. Okay, If you have a special circumstance such as deceased parents or a parent incarcerated, is there a way to avoid the required parent income information and use only my own? I guess like an independent student.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, yes. That reminds me, I actually didn't address the previous part of that question before too. But so yes, your parents' circumstances are definitely something that we want to know about, your guardian situation. So please be honest with us about that. And in many cases, like if you're not able to get documents or you're not in touch with a parent for any reason, that's okay. What we will ask you to do is write just again an explanation of what's going on, so we have an accurate picture of your situation, and then we can waive certain requirements based on that. And the same with documentation in general. So if you had a year where, for whatever reason you did not file taxes, we would work with you individually to see how you can provide some kind of documentation to show proof of income. And if it's just not there, then in many cases we can waive.
All right. And another resume question. How many years back do you suggest? And I think I understood you to say like, I would like college era, like don't go back to the beginning of time, and you don't want to have 37 pages of a resume.
You got it.
Like
Yeah,
what
yeah,
relates to your current situation, what's relevant.
absolutely. So the one caveat might be that if you have an activity that has like it extended into college, something that is community oriented, and you want to talk about like that journey from maybe middle school to high school to college, or high school to college, that's okay. But you don't have to tell us all of the things from high school that aren't relevant to you anymore.
Alan, do you all ever get like returning students that will apply? Because I think those students, it might be if they don't have maybe say as much activity, that's where maybe like their workforce information, even if it goes back a little bit, might be a little more important.
Yes, really good point. We do have returning applicants, and absolutely, as they move through life and have new experiences, they add those to their application, and inevitably that it gets stronger. So yes, that happens, and we've had repeat applicants become scholars also, who maybe didn't get it in the first try but were able to in the second.
And do you allow for dually enrolled students to apply?
Yes. So the dual enrollment is that rule about the 4-year university still applies to dual enrollment if you are like technically enrolled at the 4-year college full-time also, but that's pretty rare. It's usually a situation where you might be taking a class or two. That's totally fine.
So that might be where high school in like involvement might be more relevant if you're actually in both high school and your community college.
Oh yes, definitely.
All right, I've got three questions. Okay, so after the applications are read and selected for the next round, what is the process to determine finalists?
So there's really 4 phases actually to the process. There's 2 committee reviews where we have a group of individuals external to the foundation but involved in the field of education, that help us read every single application completely. And so that group of readers, again, we have 2 rounds of that, and they make cuts in each round. And then that will get us to that semifinalist group that I mentioned earlier. At the semifinalist stage, that's when we do the financial review, and then we will start to look more closely at program fit. So really at the semifinalist stage, we have vetted to feel that academically, like everyone is strong enough to move forward. And now we're thinking more about where is the need and the fit for the program strongest. And so the leadership team at the foundation conducts that full read of applications with that in mind. And then we do the financial review. And then the 4th phase is an interview process. And so we invite anywhere from, I would say, like 75 to 100 students to be interviewed by an educational advisor. And again, that interview is really focused on understanding why they want to be involved with the community, a little bit more about sort of what their aspirations are. And then those advisors start to help us determine, okay, like these are the students we really want to bring into the program.
Okay, and a student has tried to sign into the Common App, cannot find the school or program for an early action deadline. Is that going to be a problem when it applies to Jack Kent Cooke?
I'm glad that question was asked too. So the tricky thing about Common App is you can apply to, as I said, many different colleges. So when you create your account, you need to search for Jack Kent Cooke Foundation Undergraduate Transfer Scholarship. And if you search that like you would any other college name, you should find our application and be able to add it to your application, your full Common application, and complete it there. So it can be a little tricky to find. And again, if you're having trouble, you can definitely email us and we can kind of walk you through it. But just remember to literally search for Jack Kent Cooke Foundation.
And another financial tax, I guess financial, for tax purposes, what if the student is independent and is married filing jointly?
So we would still have the same requirement for under 30 with parents. But again, just want to reiterate that we're taking a percentage of that. We'll definitely be thinking about, your household dynamic. If you're married, what your income looks like within your household. And if you kind of let us know, like these are my parents' income, but they're not supporting me, this isn't like part of my financial sort of flexibility, we'll take that into account. We'll still want to know, but we'll take that into account when we review.
And one last question. Since last year's classes were mostly virtual due to the pandemic, there was not a lot of opportunity to participate in campus activities. Will that affect my application?
Yeah, super important question. One that many people have asked. And so I think it gives you an opportunity to, think a little bit differently, like more creatively, right, about how you present your strengths. If you haven't had the chance to build as much in-person experience like most of us, we're not, dinging you for that, but we do want to see, okay, well, what have you been doing? Have you been able to supplement through like a virtual space some of the activities that you're involved in? Or did you, pick up a new thing as a result of the pandemic, become interested in a new thing? We would want to hear just what your journey has been like, particularly if the pandemic has impacted you in this way significantly. We want to know about it. We don't want you to omit that because that's part of your story.
I think we've cleared all the questions from the chat and the Q&A box at this point.
That's great.
Yeah.
That was a good Q&A.
Well, a lot of great questions.
Yeah. So thank you everyone for joining us. I know it's a Thursday night and I'm sure we all have dinner and kids and other homework and all sorts of things to do. And so we really appreciate you spending some time with us. Alan, thank you so much for sharing information about the Jack Kent Cooke Foundation scholarship. And please remember that if you have any questions, you can email scholarships@jkcf.org, or you can email at Phi Theta Kappa at scholarships@ptk.org. Give us a few days and we will have a copy of the recording up in the Scholarship Support Library. Thank you so much, everyone. Have a good night.
Thank y'all. Have a good one.